Good evening. Welcome to our Carinine show. And I have a special welcome tonight. We're privileged and honored to have as our guest Sir Arthur Foulkes, former retired Governor General. So, Excellency, it's so good of you to come and share with us, and we wish you a very happy majority rule weekend since the day has passed.
Your Grace, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
Yes, I've invited Sir Arthur to join us to talk about something that he not only knows about but has experienced personally, about the whole history and background to our Majority Rule Day. This is now the second year of which we have observed it as a public holiday, but it expresses much more than just a public holiday. I like to say that I think Memorial Day was a climax of a movement which has subsequently been taken over into a political party. But I think that I make a distinction between what I call the movement and the actual political details, because I remember vividly growing up that, most of us were not so much politically minded, but most of us were looking forward to change.
Right.
That, we were subjected to a way of living where we were restricted in many different ways, and we look forward to this change, and majority rule represent the beginning of that change.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sure you would have many vivid memories of
yes, indeed. Archbishop, as you say, it was indeed a movement, and people tend to forget that. And I go back a little further than just that period. A lot of other people contributed to this over the years. There were some men, heroes of the past, like Bert Cambridge, Dr. Walker. All of them contributed. And Sir Etienne de Puch. I think Sir Etienne de Puch perhaps did more than anybody else before the advent of the PLP to open people's eyes, because he relentlessly exposed.
Yes, and at one time he was the lone voice in the wilderness cry.
And he was relentless in his criticism and exposing their misdeeds and opened a lot of eyes. And the movement was the beneficiary of that.
Yes. I was wanting to use, I said, the thing you shared with me about, I think you said you did this in 13, but some of the points you raised in your statement that you addressed to the young people. The first paragraph says, Majority Rule Day memorializes what was, in a sense, a second emancipation, since that was the day when people of African descent, who made up the majority of the population of the Bahamas, were enabled for the first time to form the government of the country. Now that in itself is an extremely significant point of reference.
Absolutely.
And from my discussion, I went to R.M. Bailey on 2 occasions over the last 3 years to talk to the higher school about this, and I was amazed to see that for most of them, they knew nothing about this, and nothing of the names that you mentioned, or some of the names you mentioned. All of that has escaped them completely. So we have a generation that not only needs to be educated, but a generation that has to help to appreciate where they have come from, because if one doesn't know the antecedents, then one doesn't come to appreciate what's really going on.
Yes, and who and what we are.
Yes. So
absolutely.
In terms of your calling it what you call a second Emancipation Day, whatever you would want to expand on that.
Yes, my feeling is that, or my assessment of history is, after the removal of the shackles, when slavery was abolished, and that was a big event in our history, but it didn't immediately bestow on black people of African descent at that time full equality and all the rest of that. That took generations of struggle to achieve. And there's so many battles that were fought along the way. Here, fortunately for us, the slavery in the Bahamas and the aftermath was not as intense as in America, but it was still pretty bad. And so we had to struggle. and there was still this residual feeling, an idea of the inferiority of one race and the superiority of another race. And so that is why I refer to it as the second emancipation, because it was then that black people could say, it was an affront. It was unnatural to have in a country where 85% of the population were of one racial characteristic, but the majority of people who governed them
from the
were
15%.
That was
where the minority not only exercised the power, but the minority controlled the privileges that were bestowed upon people.
And that is another thing that people don't quite understand about the importance of majority rule, because up until then, the country was governed by what I always refer to as a classical oligarchy. There's no question about that. And they, the majority of white people in the Bahamas were not a part of that.
Oh no,
actually.
it was a separate
it was a group.
Yeah.
It was a small group. Etienne used to call them I forget what he had many descriptions of them, but the Bay Street Boys was commonly known one. And they governed the country to their benefit, and blacks were most advantaged, but whites, poorer white people were disadvantaged as well.
Oh, very much so. And there were many of them who were outside of the loop.
Precisely.
And but some of our younger people find it difficult to sort of digest the fact that when we were growing up, that you were forbidden to go to restaurants on Bay Street. You couldn't go to the theater on Bay Street.
Yeah.
You were so restricted. And they find it difficult to even picture that.
Exactly.
Exactly. They enjoy the freedoms and the privileges that we did not enjoy.
Today it's unthinkable. And to us, at least those who were progressive and liberated, it was unthinkable then.
But it was still, but it was part of our experience.
It was part of our experience, exactly. Yeah.
And even, I would say, even after majority rule day, there was still some residual elements in some parts of the society that found it difficult to accept that change had taken place.
Yes.
And so, about change is always difficult for some people to embrace, but it was a fundamental change that came over. I was in Barbados, and I was on the staff at the seminary in Barbados, and I stayed up that night late to get the news. I think it was after midnight.
That must have been exciting. Away from home.
Yeah, to be able to appreciate what had happened, and to appreciate the fact that now there was this opportunity for the majority to be in charge and in control of the affairs of the country. And in many respects, we resemble South Africa. We didn't have it quite as bad as we didn't have to have travel documents and IDs and travel, but and they had the situation in which the vast majority of the population was subjected to a very small minority who exercised all of the authority and all of the power.
They were enslaved in their own country.
But although we weren't quite enslaved, I mean, many of us suffered for what I call the inequality of opportunity. Because only certain people got the opportunity to advance, whereas those, I would say really perhaps it was about 5% of the population that really controlled,
if not smaller.
If not smaller, but certainly not more than 5%.
Not more than 5%.
Benefited almost totally from the setup.
Your Grace, something that we were talking about white Bahamians. I won't call any names, but to illustrate how this thing worked, there was an ambitious young white Bahamian who worked in an establishment on Bay Street. And he decided he wanted to get out of that, and he wanted to get into another business. It was a liquor business, which, as you know, was controlled by several families. And they came down on him like a ton of bricks. you know, how dare he, you know, to be able to presumptuous to get into it. You know. But I think that I believe that from then, as far as I know, I think he became a supporter of the PLB back then. Because it was revealed to him exactly how bad this thing was.
How the system really was. Yeah. And I think some people today would find it difficult to appreciate the fact that the entire economy was controlled by the Bay Street Boys, who decided, and they allocated to families, and this family got this sector, this family got the next sector.
They shared exactly.
And you could not penetrate that circle. And I just am trying to help younger people to appreciate it. One only has to find the right kind of words, but to paint the picture for them to come to appreciate, because they just find it impossible to imagine how this could happen. But in terms of the change that took place, you were very active in the 60s, in Parliament and outside. I just wondered whether you could say something about what it felt like to be a participant in that first.
Well, we felt privileged. I think that's the best word I could use, because I mentioned the others who had struggled before for advancement, but it fell to our time and to us to sort of get it over the top. And that is what we did. And a lot of people contributed. There were those of us who were well known to the public, or were well known, not so well known now, who were in the struggle, who were elected. But there's some other people, Your Grace, who also sacrificed a lot, whose names will never be known, never remembered. I think of people like Moses Davis and Foulkes. I think of people like Smiley Butler, Effie Walks, Ronald Dane Woods, people like them whose help and work, without that, the movement could not have succeeded. And there were many of them throughout the country, in Nassau and the Family Islands, and it took some courage for them at that time
to stand
out. Yes, indeed. But how I felt, I know, you know, we were so disappointed with the results in 1962.
Yes, remember that, the first election when we had
the universal adult sub. Yes, exactly. And well, the next 5 years we all buckled down and we finally did it. And it was a wonderful feeling, because those of us who were in the movement and close to it and who were the sort of architects, we realized the importance of it. And we realized that we were involved in a great thing. And we were very, very fortunate. So the day itself, I mean, there was a feeling of euphoria that I don't think has been duplicated too many times.
Well, moments like that never occur. You don't get a second chance.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
Could we just make our first break at this point?